I want to talk about my most underrated NFL teams entering the 2023 season. Now, we've already did top 10 offenses, teams that are most likely to disappoint this year. If you haven't seen those already, make sure that you go ahead and check those out. But what teams are being overlooked going into this season? I believe the biggest one has to be the Washington Commanders. Now, you may be looking at me like I'm crazy and I'm drugged up, but I'm not. I'm trying to tell you people, man, the Washington Commanders are being heavily overlooked. They got Eric Bieniemy as their offensive coordinator. He's been on Kansas City staff for the last couple of years. He's been a really big part of why they've been able to have the success that they've had over the last couple of years. And there are a lot of people in the national media who go to war for Eric Bieniemy, arguing that he deserves to be a head coach. And this is Eric Bieniemy's chance to prove that he's not only a great offensive coordinator, but also head coach material. Back when he was with the Kansas City Chiefs, nobody knew to the extent how much he was to Kansas City's success. Now with the Washington Commanders, there's going to be no questions asked. If the Washington Commanders have success on offense, we already know it's going to be mainly due to Eric Bieniemy. And if he's able to get Sam Howell playing at a high level, that's not only going to make him look good, but it's also going to help him get even more coaching opportunities when it comes to getting that head coaching gig. Because teams are going to look at him and be like, okay, so Andy Reid wasn't just a part of helping Patrick Mahomes develop, but also you were too, because look what you did with Sam Howell. So if the Washington Commanders can at least have a average to slightly above average offense this year, this is going to be a playoff team. The NFC is not all that great outside of the Eagles and the 49ers and the Detroit Lions. There's not a lot of teams in this conference that you can look at and be like, oh yeah, they're a lock for the postseason. Now, when you look at this division, you got the Eagles, you got the Cowboys in there. Both those two teams are expected to be amongst the best teams in the NFC this year. But you look at the Washington Commanders, I think this team is good enough to at least win 10 or more games. They got a really talented offense. When you look at what they have a receiver, Terry McLaurin is one of the more underrated receivers in the game. You got Curtis Samuel, who's really solid when he's healthy. Jahan Dotson was arguably the best rookie wide receiver in the league last year before he went down with that injury. And you got a really good duo of running backs in Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson. And I believe that this offensive line should improve this year. Your only concern is Sam Howell, but if Eric Bieniemy is as good as an offensive mind as many people give him credit for, there's no reason why this offense shouldn't be better than what it was previously under former OC Scott Turner. The Washington Commanders, under Ron Rivera, since he's become their head coach, they have had the top 10 defense every single year. They have one of the most talented defensive lines in the NFL. Montez Sweat, Daron Payne. You also have Chase Young, Jonathan Allen. This is one of the most talented defensive lines in the NFL, and they have a really good ability to get pressure on the quarterback. So you know that this defense is going to be top tier. All you need is for this offense to be solid, and it should be good enough for you to get into the postseason. I don't think the Giants are going to be all that good this year. They have one of the toughest schedules in the NFL. You look at Washington, I think their schedule is pretty manageable. So all you really need is for your offense to be solid. And if your offense ends up performing better than that, you're going to be not only just a lock for the playoffs, but you could win a playoff game maybe. Washington Commanders are my most underrated team going into this season. The Carolina Panthers are the next team that I have on this list. Many people think they're going to finish third or second in this division behind the New Orleans Saints or the Atlanta Falcons. I don't think the Saints are going to be that good this year. I think the Saints are going to be more likely to disappoint than they will be to succeed, because I don't believe in Dennis Allen. I don't think Dennis Allen is a good coach, and most second chance coaches don't work out in the NFL. And at this point of Dennis Allen's coaching career, he is what he is. I know he brought in Derek Carr, signed him to a big deal, and the New Orleans Saints have a really talented roster, but talent doesn't matter if you don't have good head coaching. Good head coaching is going to be able to elevate your team. And if you have a good team, it's going to put you in a situation where you're not only going to be able to win your division, but also be able to win in the postseason. But Dennis Allen isn't a good head coach, and you can make all the excuses that you want to about him having to deal with injuries and whatever. But Frank Reich is a proven head coach. He led Indianapolis to the playoffs with Phillip Rivers. He's really good when it comes to getting the most efficient quarterback play. Carson Wentz's final season in Indy under Frank Reich had the most efficient season of his career, 27 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. And you saw what happened when he went to Washington. He pretty much fell apart. Look at how good Jacoby Brissett was playing under Frank Reich. Hell, Phillip Rivers' final season in the NFL under Frank Reich had one of the best seasons of his career. He was really efficient that year despite being up there in age. So with Bryce Young, I think that him going to Carolina was the best landing spot for him because he's going to a team that has an offensive-minded coach. And Carolina has a better roster than what a lot of people are giving them credit for. Their offensive line was either 11th or 12th in sacks per game allowed. They were really good when it came to run blocking. And they're going to have a fantastic defense with defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero, who was the defensive coordinator for the Denver Broncos last year. And remember that the Broncos defense was the only thing that was giving them chances to win games when they weren't getting blown out. The Carolina Panthers have a really good team, and I'm going to be really surprised if they don't win this division. Frank Reich, without a doubt, is the best head coach in this division, and it's not even close. You remember what Doug Peterson did with the Jacksonville Jaguars last season? Even though Doug Peterson has had way more success than Frank Reich has been pretty successful during his time as the head coach for Indianapolis. He has a winning record, and he has a good track record of being able to get the most out of quarterbacks. And I think that Bryce Young is going to have a really good rookie season, and I think the receivers that they have around him, Adam Thielen, Terrence Marshall, they may not wow anybody on paper, but I think those guys are going to be good enough to get the job done and help Carolina win a pretty weak division. The Chicago Bears, believe it or not, are being heavily underrated this year. A lot of record predictions that I've been watching don't really have Chicago being all that great. And there's a good amount of people who, they believe in Justin Fields, but they don't think he's going to have the kind of season that people like me believe that he will. Now, I believe that Justin Fields is going to have his coming out party this year. He is going to end up being in the MVP discussion. Hell, I would consider Justin Fields to be a dark horse MVP candidate going into this year. They improved the offensive line. They signed Darnell Wright. They also traded for DJ Moore, so they're giving Justin Fields a true number one wide receiver. You're going to have Darnell Mooney coming back. You got a good group of running backs. And Luke Getsy, I think, is a pretty good offensive coordinator. And this defense should be way better this season than what it was last year. You got a pretty good young secondary. Hopefully your pass rush should improve this year. And you paid Tremaine Edmonds a lot of money in free agency. The Chicago Bears, they're in a division right now that's up for grabs. A lot of people's looking at the Detroit Lions, and they're the favorites to win this division. But outside of them, the Minnesota Vikings, they could end up having a down year. The Green Bay Packers, you don't really know how good Jordan Love is going to be. If Jordan Love ends up being good, then the Green Bay Packers should be in the playoff discussion. But he also could end up being bad because you don't really know what you're going to get out of Jordan Love. It's kind of like just throwing the football up from the middle portion of the field and throwing the Hail Mary. You don't know if Green Bay is going to be able to come down for hit on Jordan Love, or if they're going to end up getting the ball knocked down and needing to find a replacement quarterback if Jordan Love doesn't work out. I'm really high on the Chicago Bears this season. If you didn't watch the Chicago Bears last year, you need to go back and watch a couple of highlights, because the majority of games that were close, it was mainly due to the play of Justin Fields. Justin Fields was literally carrying this offense on his back, and I'm not saying that metaphorically, people. I mean that literally. If you go back and you watch Justin Fields the first time he played the Detroit Lions, he was a man on a mission. It was like letting the hound out of the cage. He could not be stopped. As a matter of fact, the second time the Detroit Lions played the Chicago Bears, Dan Campbell made sure that Justin Fields didn't have the kind of performance that he did last year. And then you look at the Minnesota Vikings, they could have a little bit of a down season when you look at how they were considered the most luckiest team in NFL history last year. A lot of their games coming down to one possessions, having a lot of spectacular comebacks. But this year, I think there is a chance that they end up regressing. So for the Chicago Bears, they have a prime opportunity to be able to make it to the playoffs as long as Justin Fields plays well, and I believe that he will. And I can't see the Chicago Bears not making it to the postseason if Justin Fields has a good year. They should at least be able to win 9 games and be able to at least compete for the last 2 spots in the NFC playoffs. The Houston Texans. The Houston Texans are a team that's being incredibly overlooked and really disrespected. Most people don't have the Texans winning more than 5 games. You look at the talent that DeMeco Ryans is inheriting on defense, they are going to be way better than what a lot of you people think. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to make it to the postseason. I'm not saying that they're going to win the NFC South. But I am saying that this is going to be a team that when you play them, they're not going to be an easy W like they were last year. This is going to be a team that's going to fight like hell, and they're going to have a lot of games that are going to come down to one possession. And I believe that the Texans are going to at least win 7 games, and they're going to become the second best team in the AFC South. This defense has a lot of young studs on it. You got Jalen Petrie, who was arguably the best rookie safety last year. It's either him or Jaquan Brisker. He led the Houston Texans in tackles and interceptions. You got Derek Stingley, who should have a really good season with DeMeco Ryans taking over the helm as the head coach. You traded up for Will Anderson. You're going to have an improved run defense. You signed a couple of key veterans in free agency. Jimmy Ward follows DeMeco Ryans from the 49ers to Houston. You also signed former Pro Bowl linebacker Denzel Perryman. So this team has a good amount of youth and a good amount of veteran leadership on the defense. And offensively, I'm a big fan of CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud, the receivers that he are going to be throwing to are going to be pretty young. But I don't think it's going to be to the point that they don't have any talent. It's just that they're going to be unproven. It's going to take a while for people to find out who's going to be the primary receivers in this offense. They did sign Robert Woods, but you don't know if he's going to be able to stay healthy. But if he can stay healthy, I think he'll be a good mentor to the young receivers on that roster. You already know I'm really high on Tank Dell, Florida boy. Got to support him. I do like Xavier Hutchinson, and there's a couple of other good young receivers on this team that I don't think are bad. They're just unproven. There's talent at wide receiver for the Houston Texans. It's just a lot of unproven talent. And then you got my guy Dameon Pierce at running back. I love me some Dameon Pierce. Had him on my fantasy football team last year. Most definitely finna pick that man up again because he's a beast. And the Houston Texans offensive line is way better than what you think. Their 2 offensive tackles last year, Laremy Tunsil and their right tackle, only gave up a combined total of 4 or 5 sacks. Titus Howard, I think he gave up like 3 or 4 sacks, and Laremy Tunsil, I think he only gave up 1. And then they improve their interior of their offensive line as well. They bring in offensive guard Shaq Mason. I think the Houston Texans are being incredibly overlooked this year. And just because I have them on this list doesn't mean I have them as a playoff team. But I definitely think this is a team that's going to be able to over-exceed expectations. And if you're a Jaguars fan, don't go into this season being super confident thinking that the AFC South is just completely unlocked, because the Houston Texans are more than capable of being able to surprise them people and being able to compete for this division if everything clicks early and CJ Stroud comes out playing like a vet. The last team are the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos, right? Last year, everybody was picking them to win the AFC. A lot of people thought that they were going to dethrone Kansas City from the ranks of the AFC West Kings or whatever. And then everything just completely fell apart. They had a lot of injuries. The offensive line wasn't good. They whiffed on hiring Nathaniel Hackett as their head coach. And Russell Wilson wasn't playing like Russell Wilson. He was playing like Russell. They traded for Sean Payton. And like I've been telling you guys all off season, signing Russell Wilson to that massive contract was an all-time big mistake, and it was going to take an all-time great head coach to fix that mistake. And Sean Payton is one of the best offensive minds in the history of the NFL. Sean Payton, his final season in the NOLA, he went 9-8 with 4 different quarterbacks. Jameis Winston had them at 5-1 on top of the division and had the best touchdown to interception ratio in the NFL. 14 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. And then he goes down, he's out for the season. In comes Taysom Hill, Ian Book, and Trevor Siemian. And some way, somehow, Sean Payton, despite all odds, still had the New Orleans Saints in the playoff conversation, in the playoff hunt, all the way to the final week of the regular season. And he did that with the worst receiving core in the NFL. Do you know who Sean Payton's best receiver was his final season in New Orleans? It was Marquez Callaway. So, for the Denver Broncos, I think they are in pretty good hands with Sean Payton. I don't know if they would be a playoff team. I do think they should be able to vie for the last spot in the AFC. I think it's going to come down to them, Pittsburgh, and the Chargers. But the Denver Broncos are being incredibly overlooked. Russell Wilson can be fixed. When the Denver Broncos fired Nathaniel Hackett, Russell Wilson was playing some damn good football. His final game against the LA Chargers last year, I saw some vintage Russell Wilson plays when he was getting outside the pocket and making a lot of big plays. I think the Denver Broncos can end up surprising a lot of people. I don't think they're going to be able to challenge Kansas City for the AFC West, but I do think they should be able to compete for one of those last playoff spots in the AFC. This is a team that has talent. They improved their offensive line. This defense should still be pretty good. They got Vance Joseph as their defensive coordinator, who's pretty respected. The Denver Broncos are a little bit overlooked. I don't think a lot of people are overlooking them. A lot of people are saying, well, JT, if Russ plays good, they can be there. Well, I'm telling you guys right now that I'm stamping it right now, June 28th, that Russell Wilson is going to bounce back this season and that the Denver Broncos will be competing for a spot in the wild card round this year. Now, if Russell Wilson doesn't play well and things fall off the rails, then you have Jarrett Stidham as your backup option. But these are my most underrated NFL teams going into the 2023 NFL season. Let me know what you guys think about my list down in the comment section down below.